first, let's take a look at this next report.
Mr. Narendra Modi should accept that there is a crisis, and Mr. Narendra Modi should start working to resolve this crisis instead of panicking and making excuses.
India's opposition leader Rahul Gandhi exhorting the Prime Minister Narendra Modi to generate employment opportunities. A day earlier, the Prime Minister himself had responded to critics, acknowledging a slump in economic activity in the April to June quarter, but promised economic revival.
ऐसा पहली बार हुआ है कि देश में जीडीपी की ग्रोथ किसी तिमाही में 5.7% तक पहुंची है। क्या पहली बार हुआ है क्या? पिछली सरकार में 6 साल में 8 बार ऐसे मौके आए जब विकास दर 5.7% या उससे नीचे गिरी थी.
Opponents at home are unsparing in their criticism of the Indian Prime Minister and his policies. But neutral observers are effusive in their praise. We think that the recent slowdown is an aberration which will correct in the coming months, and the GDP growth will stabilize during the year. We've been watching carefully as Prime Minister Modi has really worked on improving the business environment, and so we think all of those efforts will pay off as well. Meanwhile, the government is determined to identify and prosecute tax defaulters. At least 13 banks have shared information with the government on suspicious transactions. 5,800 companies will be scrutinized. That's not all. The government is listening. It's receptive to feedback, open to addressing the woes of small traders.
We had cautioned the government against the hasty implementation of the GST. We had also asked them not to create this complication of making Indian GST the highest in the world, and that too by excluding 45% of the GDP. That's the petroleum products, alcohol, electricity and real estate. Now there has to be a course correction. And the course correction can only be uniform across sectors and across the country.
India's biggest festival season begins in a few days. And to what extent Indians loosen their purse strings will be a big factor in analysing the state of the Indian economy. Bureau Report, WION.
All right, Mr. Mishra, there you saw the report about what ails the Indian economy. Talking about GST or demonetization, a few months down the road, how do you look at its implementation? Is there still a work in progress, and are there pitfalls that the government should be keeping a lookout for?
You see, I won't look at it as a pitfall. It's actually when you take big reforms,
right.
When you want to do something very drastic, like the demonetization was a drastic step, Even the GST is something which we have been talking about for the last 20 years.
That's right.
And then it has happened now. The government has gone ahead, shown the courage to go ahead to do these reforms. So there is definitely going to be resistance from such people who have been evading taxes, who have been always dodging the government in terms of proper returns on their income. They will never be comfortable. So we have to make them understand that they also need to be part of the economy. They need to come in. There has to be a kind of a buy-in in terms of all the stakeholders,
right,
to make the government move forward. And I think this is the right time. Opposition should not be for the sake of opposing you become an opposition.
True.
You see, you need to be a good, alert, intellectually capable opposition.
Absolutely.
You need to tell the government where they're going wrong with solutions. That what should be the next step. Like GST, say for example, all the oppositions are part of the GST Council, but none of them are saying that we were party to this and we agreed to do this jointly, and now we need to bring changes like the change which was announced today.
Right.
For example, several changes are coming in.
Sure.
So we need to wait and watch and support the government in terms of going forward. So the GDP, is an indicator, but that's not end all.
Absolutely.
That's not end all.
Right. Mr. Mishra, do hold your thought. I'm now joined by my colleague Sumit Chaturvedi from the WION newsroom. Good evening, Sumit. There's a lot of debate and criticism of the radical economic reforms unleashed by this government, namely GST and demonetization. Now, this morning we saw at least 13 banks share information about more than 200,000 suspicious transactions or accounts in the immediate aftermath of demonetization. What do you make of the charges and counter charges that we are seeing these days?
Well, first of all, that the charges that have come in the last few days, well, that have been clearly a rebuttal has been given by the government in the form of verbal communication, as well as today also in the morning when we saw around 2.5%, only 2.5% of around few companies when they declared the kind of money they got deposited or they routed through their bank account was whopping 4,500 crore rupees. So that kind of black money has been unearthed so far. So that is one thing that has been happening, and clearly the debate is happening. Our government is rightly being attacked by the parties, saying that what has happened. Now it's government's turn. So in the morning today, they came with a big reply on black money, and today evening, as we speak, FM Jaitley is announcing a slew of measures to bring relief for two affected parties: exporters first, and second, MSMEs, which is medium and small scale enterprises. So 2-3 relief measures, they have big measures they have announced, and I can tell you about that. Is that first they are addressing the issues of refunds of exporters. 2 months of refunds haven't been given. FM Jaitley has given timeline that refunds will be given by 18th October and 10th of October. This is the timeline. Also, e-wallet will be created so that if the refunds will be transferred to that e-wallet. Another big issue is that composition scheme has been announced, where the overall threshold has been shifted from 0.75 lakh to 1 crore rupees now. And another important thing here is that the return filing has been made easier. Till 1.5 crore rupees, there will be no monthly return filing. The return filing will be quarterly, and thereafter it will be monthly. So now it's government's turn to defend itself. Last few days and weeks, we saw different parties attacking government on two main reforms, note ban and GST. But now it's the turn of the government, who has come forward and is trying to defend itself. Rest of the days, we will see what happens next, who is more powerful than other. Because, as we say, business and finance is a very logical thing also, because one data you can throw at others. So that is what to be seen in the next few days, what happens next.
Indeed, Mr. Mishra, there Sumit was talking about the charges and counter charges, how the opposition is training its gun on the government. Now, the opposition, for its part, questions the dearth of jobs in the job market, whereas we also heard from World Bank, which is supremely optimistic and about the situation. So where do you stand on this whole debate?
You see, let me be very clear on this. I am a person who wants to promote as a consumer policy person. I like technology. I like use of technology because it brings in a lot of transparency and accountability. So when we bring in technology, there are a lot of investors from overseas who want to come to India to invest in technology.
Right.
So it will be a huge, kind of a game changer, because I'm looking at all the youngsters today. They all are on smartphone. They're all on a laptop. They're all on, connected with the technology. So they will all have huge job opportunities. It is to come when we start accepting it. And once we accept it, it is absolutely going to open up, because the whole world, it's not only the World Bank, the whole world, the financial world especially, is looking at India as a appropriate destination, because as you know, there is a little downturn in China. So people are all looking at India. So this is an opportunity for us.
Absolutely.
And
are you therefore suggesting that this is a marked improvement in terms from the so-called policy paralysis that one saw in the previous administration?
Absolutely. You see, the kind of decisions, the number of people who have bank accounts now, phenomenal increase. The number of taxpayers, phenomenally increasing, in terms of the percentage increase. So what we have to always understand and realize and encourage is to make the citizens understand that they are part of the nation building, and they should not be evading taxation. They should not be evading in terms of being creative, innovative. So there has to be a lot of opportunity given to entrepreneurs. So as our Prime Minister keeps talking about, that we should not be job seekers, but we should be job creators.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking at a huge amount of youngsters in our country going into entrepreneurship, going into areas which they have core competence in and excelling in that by creating jobs for the people, not only for themselves, but for their colleagues and others.
And Mr. Mishra, you mentioned about China. I have to ask you this. How does India compare globally, even as we speak?
You see, what I have observed is, till now, you see, actually you can't compare both the countries because they are under a different kind of environment and we are on a different political environment.
Right.
But what we always have to see is how China is very keen to understand about India. I have been observing in the last 2 years, China is extremely keen to understand how they can come to India and do business with us. Even the Indian entrepreneurs are wanting to go to China. So there has been a very congenial environment and exchange between the two countries. And it's a healthy competition, let me put it this way. Now, we used to always say Chinese goods, we used to laugh at them, But today, the Chinese goods are becoming real competition. They are also looking at quality. They are also looking at how to make it more affordable, competitive, as India has been doing, So I'm personally very excited because as consumers, I always feel we must have choice and we should be empowered to take an informed choice. So that informed choice is being empowered to an individual Indian consumer and a youngster who is just maybe out of college and staying in a village and maybe helping the father who is a farmer to bring in technology there to get the best price in terms of the produce. And this is where I am looking at, forecasting in terms of the weather, how to tackle good farming practices, to ensure that the harvest they produce is healthy, is not contaminated. So all these things are going on in terms of our reforms which is taking place in our country.
And Mr. Mishra, on the other side of the debate, we've heard from former Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha. We've also heard from the leader of, from the main opposition party, Rahul Gandhi. Mr. Sinha, for his part, maintained that he has cautioned the government to change or course correct, as it were. Mr. Gandhi, for his part, says that if you cannot create more jobs, then you must quit. Let someone else take over. So what do you make of this whole narrative around the, the anxiety surrounding some of the economic reforms that this government has undertaken?
See, Yashwant Sinha is a very matured politician, and I would always look at his critique very, in a real strong manner. But I would not go in terms of Rahul Gandhi at all, because at the present moment he doesn't even understand what is economy, because he is not able to interpret what is going on. So I would request him to restrict himself to political comments rather than economic comments. And Yashwant Sinha's comments, I look at it very positively in the sense that we all need to correct our course, we all need to learn to listen, but we need to also do what is good for our country based on good sound advisors, not individuals like Yashwant Sinha, but a group of advisors who would be economically sound, like the Niti Aayog, experts who are there. I would be more in tune with what Niti Aayog will suggest to us rather than an individual person. But of course, he has his own kind of a background, and he is also a very intellectually capable person, Yashwant Sinha. So I would take his critique, I will listen to him, but it's not important for me to react to that.
Absolutely.
You see, so that's
and in your estimation, Mr. Mishra, what's your diagnosis of the state of the Indian economy, and what kind of solutions or what would your advice be to the policymakers who might be vested with the mandate of steering the economy?
My immediate reaction is the government must now get into hard task in terms of really implementing all the policies on the ground. So there has to be huge expenditures, especially government expenditures on infrastructure, on healthcare, on energy. There has to be huge amount of investments which are already allocated, but they are not being utilized. So there has to be a lot of activity on the ground now. You see, we want to see that there are number of people who get involved in the healthcare delivery system in the country. Government has already announced that we want to spend more in healthcare. Now, if government wants to spend more on healthcare, how do we facilitate the government to spend that? So the people who have been assigned to do that work They should now get into real business. And I think it's time for the government to actually crack the whip on them, and to see that they do that, and create those kind of environment for which the money has been allotted or the money is being mobilized from the taxpayers in our country.
And before I let you go, Mr. Mishra, very quickly, listening to Finance Minister Arun Jaitley, are you convinced by his arguments? Are you think he's on the right course?
Well, see, I'm always convinced when people are in a consultative mode. If you are in a consultative mode, you are listening to everybody.
Fair enough.
You are trying to take everybody's viewpoint and then bringing a consensusness within the states to buy in terms of these reforms. I think that's the best way around, and he is in the right direction.
All right, on that note, Mr. Bijon Mishra, thank you so much for joining me in the studio this evening. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for your time.